Hello, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Morris, and I'm the Director of Client Relations at Pelcro. And joining me today is our account executive, Claudia. And for those of you who don't know, Pelcro is an all-in-one subscription and membership management platform. And we've both had the great pleasure of working with notable clients in the space, as you see in the slides. And we've worked with them really to achieve some of the results you see here as well, in terms of an increase in subscriptions, increases in auto renewals, decreases in customer service requests, and increases in gross revenue overall. And throughout that time, we get asked a lot of the same questions. And so what we wanted to do is put together answers for three of the most common and what we see as the most important questions overall. Now, it is important to note that in the past, we used to get asked one main question, which is, will I be able to drive subscription or membership revenue? But that question has already been answered, and the data shows it. According to the World Economic Forum, 53% of people are willing to pay for news in the future, and 70% are willing to pay for entertainment. And that number has and continues to increase. And so over time, the question has shifted from will I be actually able to drive subscription and membership revenue to what can I do to start, grow, and optimize my subscription and membership offering? And that's exactly what we'll be answering today.
Thank you, Andrew. And as mentioned, my name is Claudia, and my focus within Pelcro is to work with clients across a variety of industries that are ultimately looking to diversify revenue streams and or capture customer data that will allow them to make more strategic business decisions down the line. On almost every day of the week, I have the absolute pleasure of getting to meet and consult for clients in both the B2B and B2C spaces. But where they are in this process ranges drastically when we're talking about membership and subscription management. Some are getting started for the very first time and looking to take little baby minor steps into gaining content and communities. While on the other end of the spectrum, I'm working with clients who have been early adopters of these business models and are now looking to really innovate in this space. Clients in this category tend to think about surpassing what we know to be as industry norms today, and instead leveraging available technology to make waves in their data and revenue collecting strategies. I will consider this webinar to be a success if within this, you close the browser and get some key takeaways that you can bring back to your team, brainstorm with, and challenge yourself to think about. Especially if you fall into the category of this is something that you've been thinking about doing for a long time, but haven't necessarily had the confidence or been willing to kind of step out of your comfort zone and do. I'm hoping that this will bring some clarity, and I'd be more than happy as well to jump on a call with you and help you figure this out. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the most frequently asked questions Pelcro gets, starting with where do I start, how do I grow, and how can I optimize my subscription, membership, or support-based business model? So when we start with looking at where to start, we often get the question of kind of what do I call my business and does it make a difference? So let's start with the key concept here. We're referring to, in this case, business models, essentially talking about if you want to call it a subscription-based model, a membership-based model, or a support-based model. Another way of looking at this is often what I refer to as what are your product offerings? What can people ultimately sign up for? I'm going to start by defining some of the characteristics of each of these product offerings in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. And as we go through these, I'll ask you to think about what your business specifically has the ability to offer your customers and how this can be directly linked to what they are likely to value. So the key kind of topic in question one is customer segments and their values. This is going to take some work as an organization because you're not only going to want to understand kind of what your customers are looking for, but then we're going to get into the concern of understanding how to deliver it to them in the way that they will also value most. So upon figuring out this element, you'll be able to make long-term, better, more informed business decisions. And which business model will make the most sense for you will really depend on who your customer segments are and what they value. So just one thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to pick just one. You may have a variety of product offerings for your business, depending on what you can offer. So moving into the very classic subscription-based model, which we can see becoming increasingly popular and something that we see really in our day-to-day lives at this point. In the simplest terms, you can think about subscriptions as being associated primarily with exclusive access. So if we were to use the publishing industry as an example, this is often represented in the form of articles, PDFs, reports. So common examples of this that we tend to see is things like newspapers, news-related digital content, for example. Whereas if we move to the next slide and we look at something like memberships, in these specific product offerings, there's really a tendency to offer more than just content per se. So think about offering things like special features, options to offer things, for example, if I'm kind of thinking out loud here, podcasts, access to private social media groups, access to their peers and other industry leaders from across their membership networks, discounts to a partnered brand or to an e-commerce store. There's really nothing that you can limit in terms of what you can add into your membership offering. An interesting trend that we see more and more is often also brands kind of collaborating together and through these memberships offering incentives to both brands, to both brands in this case. In a membership-based model, the way you can kind of tell if this would be the best suitable option for you, or one of, I should say, there usually tends to be a very shared demographic amongst those that will join. And within these demographics, there's commonalities in terms of interest in particular insights or products that are being offered. Moving into the next slide here. So if we were to look at the support and donation model, I would say that this one is, for a lack of better terms, the most straightforward in the sense where from a value perspective, these are customers that really ultimately support you and more importantly, support your mission. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and this is one that I often hear within the podcast kind of advertising segment where they're talking about, for example, we've always been free, and to help us remain free, please support or please contribute to X brand or X podcast. So, for them, they're kind of leveraging that aspect of keeping something free, but they also are in that moment making their audience cognizant about the fact that they do need funding to be able to survive, and audiences are becoming, increasingly understanding of that aspect as well. So we've gone through at this point the subscription models, we've gone through membership models, and lastly, we've gone through support. So the follow-up question I now tend to get is, which is the best one? And as I've mentioned before, my answer is always the same. The best one will really be dependent on what your customers value and what you have to offer. There is not a magic model that's going to solve all of the business problems or that is going to necessarily be the best fit. It's really going to come to evaluating who your segments are and what is most important to them. I can tell you, however, there's not a best one, but what I can maybe give you in terms of insights and what I'm seeing in the market from day to day, what is becoming increasingly popular across industries, across brands, is this notion of the membership model. And I think the reason why it's tending to be favoritized and strategized more often is because if you go back to kind of what we were looking at earlier in that slide, memberships allow you to offer various content offerings based on a number of segments, right? So even though consumer X might only want one aspect of the membership, another one might be still willing to pay for the same membership if another incentive within it is appealing to them. So you can essentially really gather a larger group of people in this case, and their values might be different, but can still be addressed within their membership offerings. Moving into the next slide and question number 2, how do I then grow? And I look at this really as when we talk about growth is what are some of the ways I can grow my user base? So the key element I would say to take away from here is similar to how we started by identifying those customer segments, identifying what they value. The way you engage with them is going to be really dependent on where they are in their customer journey. So again, there's not a one shoe fits all approach here either. So if you were to look at a customer journey through the funnel, which we've kind of put in kind of bullet point numbers, as you can see on the slide, you'll have the customers that are really ready to buy. And this will go all the way down to those who may not even know you even exist. So let's start with point number 1, the ready to buy. Take advantage here of really what we know as the most low-hanging fruit, right? So use targeted paywalls to go after these engaged users. Keep in mind, when I refer to the term paywall at any time in this webinar, this is really a catch-all term. So depending on your organization's goals, this can be something as simple as a registration wall that is in place to collect data in exchange for an extra piece of content or for a subscription or membership, for example. Next, moving into the middle of the funnel, this consists more of the casual users who may not be ready to necessarily buy today, or they may not be familiar enough with your brand to necessarily consider purchasing at that time. So points 2 and 3, the type of engagement required at these levels in the funnels may require you to give something up in return for valuable customer information to, in the long term, convert these we'll call them the so ready to buy users later down the line, right? So consider something like we mentioned earlier in terms of progressive profiling. Consider something like offering up additional pieces of content in exchange for information, or a limited time access to a gated contact in exchange for providing you with the email address, or signing up to a newsletter, maybe filling out a survey in what they're most interested in reading about down the line. What you gain at that point as an organization is the ability to now have either to have someone really put into a drip marketing campaign, learn how to best engage with them, understand what they value. Essentially, you're just gathering the information that can help you make, as we've mentioned a few times at this point, more informed, healthier long-term business decisions. If we were to continue down this funnel and look at point 4, those that may not even know you exist or what you have to offer, in their customer journeys, we're taking a step backwards here and kind of forcing you to kind of reevaluate what your advertising strategy is. And advertising strategy directly related to the product offerings that we're talking about in question 1. So where is your demographic of users reachable? Are you ensuring that you have a diversity of strategies of where you're advertising? Things like social media, strategic placement on the website, what's the word I'm looking for? Content that advertised that are being directly consumed at the right user at the right level on the site. And then finally, at the very bottom of the funnel, we have those churned clients. And I think, let's call a spade in the sense where it's unrealistic to think that you'll have 100% retention rate. So I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed if you're experiencing a realistic number of cancellations or non-renewals within a year. But what I would challenge you again to do is ensure that you're getting as much feedback as possible so you can evaluate and continuously improve on those retention strategies. It's also important to not give up on those churn clients. So thinking about things like re-engaging with them. How are you communicating with them at that point? Are you offering them incentives and leveraging marketing campaigns, for example, with promotions and coupon codes that they can use to resubscribe or become a member at that point? Moving into the third question, how do I now optimize the business offerings? So you've decided at this point on who your customers are. You've established this by figuring out what they value, and you've put in place the right product offerings. You're engaging with them depending on where they are in that buyer journey. And now you have to essentially optimize this user experience to make sure that that purchasing experience or that sign-up experience is really as seamless as possible. So this is this is probably my favorite part to talk about, because when I'm talking or consulting with clients at this point, I generally pull up their website first, and I go through a purchasing process with them, and I'll ask them to kind of what I call put on their customer hat, check the bias at the door. And the interesting thing is, most of the time it's not as simple as they think, or I'll point out little elements that they'll realize, okay, that can actually slow down the process, or this can be sped up, or how does this feel? Am I brought to another tab, et cetera? And we'll get into these points, but kind of what I'm asking you to do at this point is just to take a step back and pretend that this wasn't your business. Pretend that you were a consumer that was landing on that same page, and how would you interact with it? So if we were to look at point 1, we really have to think about this as gone are the days of purchasing subscriptions or membership through this basket format, right? So for example, think about the time you first signed up to Netflix. How seamless and fast was that experience? Think about on the other side of that spectrum, when was the last time you abandoned a purchase because of how lengthy the form looked or how long it took to load, for example? I really can't stress this enough. Conversion rates are so heavily impacted by your form length. So notably, you'll have a 25% chance of conversion when the customer is required to fill in 3 fields, but that decreases up to 5% with every additional field. So from a user experience perspective, I'll stress the following. Ensure that you have no long forms, that you're only asking for essential information relative to the product being purchased. moving into points kind of 2 and 3 at this point that all combine together, ensure that you're utilizing modern technology, things like digital wallets, Apple Pay, Google Pay. These are becoming norms in our day-to-day online purchasing. And leverage sign-up norms with functionalities like social logins, right? So Google sign up, LinkedIn sign up, Facebook, etc. In terms of fun facts about digital wallets, so about 50% of European consumers in this case use a digital wallet and have used a digital wallet at least once in 2020. And the notable part about this is actually 60% of these consumers said they likely would have abandoned their purchase if they couldn't have paid with their preferred method of payment. So again, this is a European example, but just something to think about in terms of where the industry is going in terms of norms, and offering these is going to become a standard in day-to-day purchasing. If we were to take a step further in point 4, if as a customer, I'm clicking on subscribe and I'm being directed to a new domain or a new tab, for example, am I necessarily going to feel comfortable entering personal information? Especially when the branding sometimes seems different, the domain can be on a different case, etc. Really try and focus on allowing your reader to complete the entire purchase on the same page that they clicked subscribe on, and allow them to go through that process in seconds. So this is done by keeping the form short, keeping the questions you're asking very digestible, and breaking it down in a step-to-step process. And looking at point 5, I'm referring to customers today having the standard expectations to be able to manage their own purchases, right? So no one wants to have to call a customer service line to make a simple change like updating a credit card or changing a billing address, for example. So stay relevant in that sense. It's going to stay relevant, I should say. It's going to be increasingly important to empower subscribers, empower members, even empower donors to really manage their own information and especially their purchases through what we call a user dashboard or a personal dashboard. This also gives you the opportunity to make it incredibly easy for them to have access and truly understand all of their subscription and membership benefits and what they're getting within these offerings as well. And last but not least, like anything else in business, launch, test, analyze your results, and make changes as needed. Nothing forcing you to stay the same. Give yourself the opportunity to see what's working. And if it's not, then decide what needs to change and how you're going to go about it. And this will bring me to my last question, but this time I'll turn it on you. What are you doing to start, grow, and optimize your business? Thank you so much for joining us today. And don't be shy to give us a call or send an email. I'd love to be able to help and brainstorm if this is something you're considering for the first time or something that you've been doing for a while and are looking to now optimize. Thank you.